a podcast by Vision Point Marketing.
All right, good day. And on behalf of Vision Point Marketing, thank you for joining us for the Rock Enroll podcast. I'm Dana Cruikshank, Director of Business Development and Senior Strategist here at Vision Point Marketing. And I am joined today by Danielle Attanasio, CRM Strategist Extraordinaire, Slate Expert, and fellow Denzian, resident fellow, I don't know what the descendant, I don't know what the word is because you still live there, of upstate New York. And Danielle, before we started recording here, we were just talking about our last names being not like super intuitive to pronounce. And I feel like in general, that is an upstate New York thing, not just our last names, but also the names of the towns, right? You think of like Schoolhare and yeah, I mean, the words go on Schenectady, which is where you're from, right?
Coke.
Exactly.
Yes, I'm from
Exactly.
Schenectady.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know, they're very hard to spell and very hard to pronounce. And I will never forget the way that we were taught how to spell Schenectady growing up.
Okay.
We got an mnemonic device, so to speak.
Okay.
Some crazy hounds eat nothing except canned treats and doggy yummies. I remember this second grade. I'll never forget it. Schenectady. I still hear it whenever I spell it.
That is so funny. My father's from Schenectady, and I always just was remembering as like Sken Chen Teddy, kind of. That was the best I could come up with. Like that was how I would remember how to spell it. But I think it's Iroquois words spelled with Dutch phonetics, and then we try to pronounce them in English. It's like three steps removed from what it should be. But anyway, so we are not here to talk about upstate New York town names, although we should. It's super fun. But we are here to talk about CRMs. You recently wrote for us a piece on our Edu Insights blog about your CRM. Is it working for you or against you? And I think CRMs is something that I have noticed within the higher ed marketing space either causes tremendous excitement. People feel like, yeah, this thing's awesome. I got this, or tremendous anxiety as well. And I'm just curious, what got you into the CRM game to start with? Because you seem like one of those enthusiasts, which is good considering your job.
Yeah, I am definitely a CRM enthusiast,
Mm-hmm.
specifically a Slate enthusiast. I'm definitely a little bit biased towards Slate.
Okay.
And I think I kind of happened upon that life. I originally started in higher education. My is not really related, but I went to grad school for student affairs and higher education. I started my career in housing and residence life.
Gotcha.
So I ultimately did some time in housing and residence life. More or less just wanted to move off campus. I had lived on campus for a very long time at that point and found a position in our admissions office. And that is sort of how I found Slate and the CRM world and how CRMs could help specifically admissions offices, but just colleges in general. When I started in admissions, they were implementing Slate for the very first time, and they had never had a CRM before. So it was interesting to see from start to finish how that type of software can benefit your business processes, but also can end up creating more work when it wasn't necessarily the intention to do that.
That's interesting. Now that was at SUNY Plattsburgh, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Now Plattsburgh being one of those upstate New York towns that is actually easy to say and pronounce and spell, but that's interesting. So let's scratch into that last comment a little bit of a CRM actually end up making more work for people than intended, right? Because I think a lot of us think of CRMs as being automation tools, allowing us to do more with fewer people, fewer resources, and so forth. Talk to me a little bit more about why, because I imagine there's some nods out there right now that, yeah, CRM actually can add to someone's burden. Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, I think that people know the CRM game as, it's helpful, it organizes people, it keeps all of your interactions in one place. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, it's one stop shop for everything that you could need in your office. And I think that that is very true. But when it comes to the automation, I also think that it's easy to get excited and swept up in it. And like, I'm going to automate everything. I have this tool now. I can just make everything happen super fast. automatically at the blink of an eye. But what can end up happening is, again, maybe creating more work or just kind of shifting work in a way that is different than what you had before. So we had a lot of examples where it worked exactly how we thought it was going to. It streamlined our processes. It made everything easier and everything fantastic to work with. But then there were always some opportunities that came up to automate where we tried it out. And what ended up happening was maybe previously one staff member in the office was doing this task and it took them, a couple hours every week to do this task. So we built some automation in our CRM to alleviate that task to free them up for some more work. But then what ends up happening is it actually shifts the focus from maybe that team member to your more technical CRM team member to do quality assurance and maintenance and making sure that automation is working well. So it might not, in the totality, I guess, decrease the amount of work required, but sort of shifts the amount of work around the office.
If I'm understanding you correctly, then it seems like a lot of times with CRM implementations, there can be this kind of mission creep, as they say, in government, that suddenly the mission starts to change, and you're having to. This isn't just about establishing relationships with or managing relationships with prospective students, but about so many other types of things. What are some of those other types of things? Because you mentioned coming in with a background from student affairs and so forth.
Yeah, definitely. And I think at the implementation level, for sure, it is so easy to get beyond the scope of what you are just focused on as your primary attention. But I think those other things that people don't think about are, document processing, travel processing, kind of events and travel, events on campus, even interactions with other offices. So integrating with your student information system, which ends up bringing in contacts from the registrar's office, the housing office, even so far as campus dining. There's also usually when you implement a CRM, a push to get all of your communications and outreach to prospective students into one central location, which opens up the need to communicate and collaborate with other departments who may have been sending out their own messaging, but you're kind of adopting it because you're the owner of the CRM. So that's another instance where maybe that could actually increase the amount of time it takes to launch these communications because you're sort of centralizing them into one spot. And I think beyond, application review and getting those automated messaging out, just the general functions of how the admissions office has to operate, your CRM ends up becoming so much more than just student management. You end up developing, staff portals, staff dashboards, ways to keep an eye on your funnel, sharing that information around campus. It just ends up touching a lot more elements.
Yeah, and that brings up a really good point as well, that I have noticed with CRMs, that I think institutions go into CRM selection with one set of priorities, and then as they roll it out, realize, oh, there are these other things we need this thing to do. And that can sometimes feel like it's not that they haven't selected the right tool, if you will. Talk to me a little bit about, what is the process in your mind for trying to figure out which CRM really is best for you?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point. And I think, again, my bias is going to shine through as someone who just loves Slate. But there is definitely something to be said about establishing your priorities first and establishing the things that are deal breakers for your office up front before you even start to do demos and reaching out to these CRM contacts. Because you'll get.
Oh,
Sorry,
I'm
go
just
ahead.
curious. What are some of those deal breakers, would you say?
Like maybe your primary focus is having strong automated communication and being able to report on those statistics versus another office might be, well, our primary focus is application review. We get so many applications every year and we just have to streamline the process and get everything in one spot. I think everybody is a little bit of both, but asking those questions like, are you losing a software you currently have to manage events? So your CRM has to be able to manage events. Do you have to integrate with a certain software on campus like Banner or PeopleSoft? And is that CRM capable of doing that integration at the level that you need it to? Just documenting everything that's important to you up front so that you're not swayed during the demonstration phase, I guess, because everything's going to look shiny. Everyone says a lot of stuff during those demonstrations that are true, but they're the kind of highlights of the system, and they'll say, "Oh yes, you can definitely do that," and "Oh yes, you can definitely build that report." But just always keeping in mind what's important to you, because not every system will be able to do everything the best that it possibly can. There are some tools that are, excellent at workflow processing and excellent at the technical components of keeping your office organized. And then there are some that are really, really strong at email template design and that kind of flashier stuff that makes it easier for you to develop some really cool email communications from scratch. And then there are some that do everything pretty well, which kind of makes them a more well-rounded option. But again, knowing those priorities up front will help you to figure out what is best for you.
So understanding what your specific needs are, kind of what some trade-offs are that you're willing to accept, maybe.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm liking this. Yeah, because that has definitely been my my observation as well. There really isn't. People always ask like, what is that? What is the best CRM? It's like, well, what is the best one for you? Seems to be
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple that are the big names that I think, anyone who's going into a CRM selection process will have those platforms on their list. But, you know, you do also have to ask yourself, like, am I just picking the CRM because it sounds like everybody else has it? Think about things like access to technical support. If you don't have staffing internally and you have to have access to somebody who knows what's going on in the system, think about asking that during your demonstration too. It's not all about the elements, I guess, of the CRM, but
Mm-hmm.
how they work with your office and how they work with the staffing that you have and the processes that you do and everything.
So maybe sometimes selecting a less capable CRM, and we could say capable in air quotes, I guess, if it is one that your office can actually maintain and don't need a lot of resources for and so forth. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, and I think to kind of define it even further, some CRMs are really out of the box. They do exactly what you expect them to do, but others may have to be customized and, loopholes and workarounds have to be built to make sure it's working exactly how you wanted it to. So maybe it means selecting one that's right out of the box, maybe not super, super strong, but it works exactly how you think it's going to work. So it won't take a lot of maintenance, and it won't take a lot of upkeep on your end.
No, that makes a ton of sense. It's interesting because in there you mentioned needing to get some outside support, especially if you don't have those resources in house. We've also seen from a number of CRM providers saying that they're going, particularly in the academic space, saying that they're actually cutting back on internal customer support and recommending that institutions work with a selected partner and so forth. We at VisionPoint actually just became Slate Partner designated, which I know you had a huge role in doing. What does it take for a partner, a third-party partner like VisionPoint, to actually become a Slate Partner?
Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm excited for us to have gotten that. There's a certain amount of validation, I suppose, that Technologians does to make sure that the company knows what's going on, actually has offerings that align with CRM support and Slate support specifically. I know that we, had to meet with them and kind of describe our offerings, describe our experience and how we were equipped and prepared to help out those clients. And I think it's exciting because it kind of gives this short list of support options for the Slate community. What's cool about the Slate community is it's a lot of people leaning on other people and just, users sharing in a Facebook group or a Slack channel, asking questions and just kind of crowdsourcing information. But there's also just this huge offering of third-party support where you can bring in someone who already knows the system and already knows how they've seen other things be built out and how they know things work well and use that to your advantage, especially if you're a school who's never had a CRM before and this is your first time. I think it's really important to get someone on board who has had that kind of experience to help you guide the implementation process.
That makes a ton of sense. It's interesting to me too when you say guiding that process. I know at a lot of campuses I have seen, if institutions have a CRM, a lot of times it was selected by, for lack of a better term, the IT staff, or the IT staff bought a student information system that they were told, oh, and it has a CRM too. Here, go ahead and use it. And those, those tend to be functional, but not always as not always as functional or efficient for marketers because they weren't sort of marketing first, if you will. So, just kind of curious, what would you say marketers need to bring to the table when they're having those conversations with their IT staff and someone's trying to say, oh, well, this won't work because of the, this, that, and the other, or, just trying to drive it down those sort of one tool for all purposes kind of situations. Any advice there?
Well, I'd first say that I think it actually depends on who that decision maker is. Because, in my opinion, I think we're seeing more than ever, maybe an admissions office or a marketing office being the one who's taking ownership and signing on with these CRMs to help out what they're doing and then bringing in their IT staff as kind of supplemental support after the fact. And I think there's benefits to both, but I've seen it both ways. And I'd say that the thing that I would keep in mind first is to establish a core team of people at your institution who are going to be your CRM gurus. Slate refers to them as Slate captains, but whatever you want to call yourself. And make sure you're bringing people to that table from everywhere that matters. So admissions, marketing, IT, I'll definitely include anyone that you possibly can. But I think the number one piece of advice is to just have an open mind and be willing to be creative about the implementation, knowing that it's not always going to be exactly what you expected it to be, and it's going to open doors to projects that you did not anticipate doing. And I think the most important thing is to remember that just because you were doing something, for the past 10 years and it's worked for you, doesn't necessarily mean that you can't change it now. I mean, implementing a brand new system is the perfect time to do that, to figure out what works well, what is clunky, what can be done away with, and what can be built in a different way to make everybody's life a little bit easier.
I love that. That is such great advice. What you just said there really resonated with me, of not trying to take an existing process and cram it into a CRM workflow, but to, try to maybe think about it the other way around. Are there any examples of that come to mind, or any common areas where people try to make the CRM do something where it'd be easier just to rework a process?
Yeah, I mean, my mind goes straight to workflow building, and I'm thinking specifically about the application review process because it's usually a very technically involved, specifically designed process. You get the application in, the student completes their checklist, the file then goes to somebody to review it. You make a decision, you share the decision with the student, and so on. It's usually follows a pretty specific template, but it's different for everybody. And there might be steps in there that you've done for the last 10 years because at some point it was the best way to do it. Like, for example, maybe you're using a system that you have to review that transcript. And for as long as you can remember, you have been inputting credits on this one screen to translate all of the credits, evaluate what courses are going to transfer in. And you just kind of follow your checklist the whole time. But when you build that into a new system, there might be things in the new system that are capable of doing things that you have never been able to do, like maybe automating a credit evaluation of some sort, or automating a GPA recalculation, or automating movement. I mean, some workflows are all manual, and it's your responsibility to kind of look through them and see what files are ready to be reviewed. But in a CRM, you might be able to have the system look at it and say, okay, this person's checklist is complete, move them into your queue, and it will just pop up for you to be ready to review. So I think in those instances, it's important to remember that if you're getting a brand new system, you might have access to things that you've never had access to before that can replace some steps in your processes that are outdated. I mean, you can't even remember who wrote the SOP for them, and you've just kind of been doing it that way because it works and you haven't been able to change it. But it's definitely a good time to do that.
That's great. And in a similar vein, you mentioned that there can be some new challenges, new things to do, if you will, that will pop up that people maybe weren't anticipating. Any particular examples come to mind, or?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to kind of the IT business unit ownership. I mean, there might be things about managing a database that your higher ed professionals are not familiar with. I mean, maintaining data integrity and doing quality assurance and making sure your records are accurate and your data imported is clean. That type of thing definitely can be unexpected for some people, and knowing what to look for. So if all of your communication, for example, is based on, the prospective student's start term and the program they're interested in. Okay, well, you have to make sure then that all of your prospective students have either a start term or a program that they're interested in. So you have to be able to kind of navigate that data to make sure that the system is working as you think it's going to be. So that can be something unexpected.
Yeah, I got to say, there are some interesting, almost laugh until you cry or cry until you laugh moments I've noticed with CRM integrations. I worked with one institution where they had a senior administrator who kept confusing CRM with CMS, and so kept asking about when this massive investment would turn into a new website and so forth, which still kind of cracks me up. But any other kind of laugh till you cry till you laugh kind of moments in the CRM world?
Oh man, now I don't know if it's super funny, but there's definitely moments where, you something, maybe you can't figure something out, and then you spend so much time trying to figure it out, and it ends up being like the simplest thing you can imagine. And it kind of relates back to automation. So I was talking with a school who was a Slate user, and a feature of Slate is actually that you're able to go into a person's record and preview the automation in the background. So any rules or automation that you've built, you can go to their record and, look at what's pending update on that. And they were receiving an error on that screen, I guess for months. I didn't know, but they had said for months, we've gotten this error. We haven't been able to figure out what's going on. And what ended up happening was there was one rule that was erroring, and it was an application scope rule, and they were trying to preview application automation. And so they had one rule that was active and it was erroring, and that was causing that entire little section of Slate to break, basically.
Mm-hmm.
We inactivated the rule. Everything worked as normal, just like nothing had ever happened.
Just flowed right through. I love that.
Just flowed right through.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people assume that you need to be a quote IT person, that you need to have some background in computer science or coding or so forth to really be able to work within a CRM. Is that true, or is that merely helpful, would you say?
I think it's merely helpful. I will say that if at all possible, I would recommend having someone on your team or in that kind of core CRM, maybe governance group, who does have that awareness. Because what is helpful is that technical data relationship awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So your CRM is usually a relational database. You can, on the technical side, it's storing data on different tables. So your person data, your application data, their school data, their test scores, they're also stored on different data tables. And the system is making it really easy for you to link all of those tables together. But having an awareness of how that is working can help you, I think, to be more comfortable in your CRM and more confident in your CRM. Because a lot of people get nervous in them and they're like, I don't want to break something. I don't want to accidentally send an email to 20,000 people. I don't want to delete something. But if you have more confidence going in, knowing how they're working, I think that can be a game changer.
How objects in a database talk to each other, relate, that sort of thing. Okay.
Hmm.
No, that makes total sense. As an aside there, my wife is a therapist. And there was a time a while back I was discussing at dinner some challenges we were having with this client CRM. And I'd said, yeah, they just can't get one object to talk to the other object. And she'd said, if you came into my office and said that, I'd be really concerned about your your grasp on reality. But in computer science, that means
Yeah,
something totally different. So
yeah.
there you go.
So I don't know. I think the CRM tool is built to make those things more accessible to someone who doesn't have that technical background,
Mhm.
but having that technical background will will help definitely.
Well, that's interesting because in your article you'd mentioned, making sure that you're asking those questions like we discussed, like just because you can automate something, should you automate it? But you also talk about the importance of testing as well. What does that look like? And can you ever test post launch? Like you've rolled out a workflow or so forth. Can you test even after you've rolled something out?
Well, I think it depends on what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Some automation is not very impactful on the student record. Like if you're talking about automating movement through a workflow, that doesn't really impact the student record. So if I'm just moving from, awaiting materials to the first read section of an application review workflow, me as the student, I would never know. My record would not really change. It's just kind of my location somewhere. So I think in those cases, your testing can be a little more flexible. Like you can maybe even turn on your automation in a test environment or something to just watch it happen and then make sure it's working properly. But if your automation is, say, updating a field value or adding a decision code or any of those kinds of elements that are actually causing a change to occur, I would definitely not recommend testing post launch. And I would make sure you do everything in a test environment or everything in preview mode. Um, I like to build a rule, and before I even turn it on, I try to get a query of everybody who's queued up to have that effect take on them, and then look at them one by one, or just a couple, pull out maybe 10 records each time. You can also, in a kind of more technical way, limit your automation to your test records or to a specific ID number with like a temporary filter in those parameters. So you can turn it on and watch how it impacts the records that you've actually isolated before you kind of go into action. Some CRMs have a lot of tools that will help you with testing. So, Slate has a test environment at your fingertips. It has a preview mode where you can actually put all that automation into play, but it won't actually take effect, but you can kind of watch how it interacts with everybody else. Um, but yeah, I love testing. I like to have a spreadsheet on the outside with all of my test records, any possible scenario I can think of that might be impacted by that automation. I like to create a test record for, and then just document my entire testing process. But that might be a little bit of automation paranoia. But sending an email to 50,000 people at a time never gets easier. So it's always better to be more careful, I think.
That is so true. So true what you're talking about. Just that paranoia of sending out those mass email effects. I
Yeah.
think if we yeah, I'm sure there are some cry until you laugh until you cry stories out there about
I think it's mostly crying, to be
yeah, it's
honest, the
mostly
stories
crying.
I can think of.
Yeah, well, I mean, you do hear those horror stories. The worst is sending that admissions notice to a student who
Right.
wasn't actually admitted, but I know.
Oh, and I think you should
Ooh,
build your system, by the way, where that is not even a possibility.
so how do you do
I
that?
mean, never reference a decision by name in a communication. I mean, you can have kind of an admittance email that doesn't say, congratulations, you've been admitted until you're positive that it's time that you can do that. So maybe that first email is, hey, we posted an update to your portal. Check it out here. And then that way, if they get it accidentally, it's like, oh, the update is that I was denied. That's not very fun, but at least you didn't automatically accept them.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Like letting them know, hey, the portal has information for you.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then,
Right.
okay. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
And
Oof.
a lot of, especially larger schools who are reviewing a ton of applications have some sort of automatic admit or some sort of, if they have 100 high school average and they did all these things, then
You're in.
we can accept them. But, doing that to a point
Hmm.
where, I mean, Slate, for example, if you're going to do that, it doesn't automatically let you release decisions in that way. You can get up to a confirmed status, and then a human does have to go in and push the final button. But just keeping that in mind with automation too, making sure your filters are really clean, making sure there's still a human element in your automation that verifies the actions that are being taken, especially if they're at that importance level.
It's interesting you say that as well, because basically people are doing things with these tools that they shouldn't, right? That a CRM can't make you a better marketer. It can't make you a better, it is a relationship manager as a tool, but it can't make you better at building relationships. For example, we enter into institutions funnels all the time, usually in terms of doing competitor research for our clients. I received a drip email from an institution whom I won't name, not a client of ours, thankfully, but I was stunned at how inappropriate it was. It was written as if I was texting someone on like a dating app and I had ghosted them because I hadn't interacted with their emails much. I hadn't clicked on any links. And it was literally, I guess it was, I mean, I give them credit for trying to be a little different and to have a little fun with it. But to me, it felt really inappropriate. Like the institution is this needy person who really wants to have a date with somebody. Like it was just weird, and that's what I mean. Like you could have these tools that could allow you to blast these emails out, but they don't make you better marketers necessarily.
Right. That's a good point. And I think, I mean, the CRM, it's a customer relationship manager, but it's not a relationship creator. And you still have to have your humans developing those relationships so that you have something to manage. So tracking interactions, but the interactions are being taken place by your advisors or your recruiters and the connections that they're making. And you store that information in your CRM and you use that data to help you in all of your processes. But I think that there is starting to be a shift of people trying to remove the humans from the equation and okay, we can just automate all of this. But personal connection is definitely still an important factor in everything.
What's interesting is this also where strategy comes into play as well.
I would say so. Figuring out what to automate, what to still have your outreach team doing manually, or when is the best time to send a text message, when is the best time to do a phone call. I mean, if your CRM also has these new voice message features, I mean, there's a ton of technology accessible, but using the strategy to help figure out when to use it. I like to do my campaigns in sort of a visual flow that has all of my automated emails and text messages laid out in the order the student will receive them. But you can also do call outs along the timeline of the points of actual human intervention in the process and when we're going to call them or documenting when they call you. I mean, as something as simple as calling the admissions office to ask a question about open house. There might be a lot of information there that it might seem like a quick transactional phone call, but there's a lot you can gather from that moment. And if you write it down in your CRM, then it gives you that much more information to go off of later.
That makes a ton of sense. I could talk about this all day, honestly,
Me too.
but I know we're running up on time, so I did just want to ask: is there anything that you really wanted to put forward, or any other thoughts?
I just think that my final thought would be I'm always trying to be very cautious about automation and using your CRM in a way that's responsible and well thought out and strategic. But don't be afraid of it. It's definitely not meant to be, be careful. You're going to ruin everything if you automate things too much. But that is not the intention. I think it's meant to be more inspiration to just think thoughtfully about your processes and how you're using your CRM and making sure that it is truly helping you and not hurting you, or at the very minimum, just not doing anything. It's definitely a tool that can benefit your processes and just making sure you're being strategic about how you use it.
Danielle, those are some great words there. That again is Danielle Attanasio, our CRM strategist here at Vision Point. Danielle, you and your teammates, I know, are leading a webinar next week, which is great. And we should have some information to that, even if it's after the fact, where folks can access that, as well as access to that blog article that you wrote. But I do just want to say that on behalf of Vision Point Marketing, Danielle and her entire team are available for consultations, really seriously, no obligation, just to have a talk about with some skilled colleagues who have been there and, just maybe able to answer some basic questions about what's going on with your CRM, or just to kind of check your math in terms of your strategy and so forth. So the best way to reach us here at Vision Point is by email at info@visionpointmarketing.com. Again, that's info@visionpointmarketing.com, or to check us out on LinkedIn and follow us there. All right. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for your time, and let's make the world a better place through CRMs for sure.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.